Dear listeners, this is the third part of this story. If you haven't seen the past part, we recommend you watch them first. The next day, at 10 o'clock sharp, I picked up Natasha. When I entered the room, my breath was taken away. Standing in front of me was a dazzlingly beautiful woman. Not even a woman. A lady. I even squeezed my eyes shut with the glow coming from her. I'm ready. Natasha smiled at the corners of her lips, but I could see that she was very nervous. The signing took place in a fancy restaurant in a hall decorated with flowers and colorful balloons. A young girl who looked very much like Natasha, accompanied by an elegant man, approached the groom. After a short speech from the registrar, the young couple exchanged rings. What a beautiful couple! Someone said softly behind me. Natasha watched the ceremony with her hands clasped to her chest. She wasn't crying. She was happy for her daughter as only a mother can be. I stood aside, trying not to draw too much attention to myself. The young people were already walking down the exit aisle when the bride suddenly stopped and turned to Natasha. Mother, tears suddenly came to her eyes. Mommy, I am so glad you are here. I've been waiting for you. The bride hugged her mother impetuously, and they stood in silence for a while. Where have you been all this time? They told me you had left me. But I did not believe it. Come, I will introduce you to my husband. The girl took Natasha by the arm. Behind her back, I saw the pale face of a man, apparently a father. He was furious and at the same time confused. He didn't know what to do. Baby? Wait. I can't now. Maybe later we can talk. Natasha was confused. No. Now, don't leave me. Ma'am, I'm so happy you're with me. Natasha hugged her daughter. Forgive me, but not now. Natasha turned to me. Thank you for everything. I'm ready. Let's go. I took a step back. I'm sorry, but you've made a mistake. I've never seen you before. I thought. For a moment. You have a wonderful daughter. I turned around and without looking back walked quickly to the waiting car. Morning. I woke up feeling cold. A new day was beginning, as dull as any that had gone by. For a long time, I remembered where I had hidden a jar of instant coffee and sugar. It turned out there was neither. All right, I'll drink my coffee at work. My cell phone beeped. I gotta change my ringtone. I quickly got dressed, threw on a black drapey coat and went out to the muddy stairwell. I had recently resolved the housing issue and moved into a one-room apartment in the center of the city a week before. Yes. Lucky me. The apartment was on the balance sheet of the Department of Internal Affairs. It used to be a hotel for seconded workers from other cities. Then it stood empty for a long time. It seemed to have been forgotten about. 2 weeks ago, all year from the maintenance department told me about this apartment. I quickly wrote a tearful report, talked to a couple of important people, and the apartment was assigned to me. By this time, I was divorced and there was nothing I could take away from my ex. It looks like she and the dealer all right. Except my son's not working out. The dealer bought him a scooter and my son now rides around town in a new helmet, living on the principle who buys the gifts is the father. And his mom must have done some work too. Quite a common philosophy in today's bastard world. I'm not gonna run after him and whine. I don't have the temperament. He's a big boy now, and if he traded his father for a scooter, then so be it. To be honest, I was fed up with the hell out of the city. I was drawn back to nature, to my grandmother's house. Such is the way of man, there is always something missing. After all, I had to find out who rattled in the attic. Novicheva kept coming to see me. I talked to a businessman I knew, and he hired her. He paid her a good salary. I managed to get her off with the help of some cops I knew. I even managed to get her into a dormitory. She and her daughter got on well and even came to see me a couple of times. The daughter did not recognize me, but it's for the best. But Natasha got it into her head that she owed me. Since she had nothing besides her body, She hinted in every way that she wouldn't mind sleeping with me as a thank you. In principle, I could make love with her a couple of times. But I knew if I let her get under the covers, she would climb on my shoulders after a while. And then that was it, the end of the movie. I'd had enough. I'd had enough of family life. So up to now, I have been able to beat Natasha's attempts. The police and prosecutors have been chewing on my case for a long time, not knowing which way to stick the article. There were no witnesses to the massacre. The stubborn father wrote a statement from his son's words. When they came to question the victim, he refused to explain anything. He only clamped his hand over his cheek. In general, I was muzzled for a while and then hold off for something I don't understand. Well, but despite the rehabilitation, I was in no hurry to return to my former position in homicide. My former boss diligently turned his face away when he met me in the corridor. They were probably preparing me for undercover work. Just kidding. Anyway, I continued to sit in the inspection and tick off the names of the inmates. I threw my coat on a hanger to dry and plugged the kettle into a socket. There was a knock on the door. Can I come in? Natasha's head appeared from behind the door. You must. I even burned my finger with a splash of boiling water. She sat down across from me and habitually put her hands between my knees. I filled out the magazine and handed her a pen. Sign. Novik oversaw it and looked at me. Yuri, we have a corporate party at work soon. She began in a gray voice. And may I invite you? They said to come in pairs. And I haven't had time to get acquainted with anyone yet. Her eyes began to fill with tears. Yui, please. Natasha, you are a beautiful woman. Can't you find a decent man for yourself? Why do you need a cop? You woman, you cry at the drop of a hat. I don't need a decent man. Natasha said sadly, there aren't any decent ones. They're all gone when they were puppies. When's the party? November 20th, 4th Autumn Ball. Natasha blotted her dry eyes. What autumn ball is winter on its way? I smoked. So will you go? Natasha decided to strike while the iron was hot. Okay, where to pick you up from? You should be at the hostel by 6 in the evening. I'll be waiting at the door. Natasha smiled. Thank you. At exactly 6 o'clock, I pulled up in front of the dormitory. Natasha was already waiting for me. Walking around the car, she sat down in the front seat. It started at 7 o'clock. We'll make it in time. Natasha murmured, pretending to be pretty. I said nothing. Somehow, she was quickly returning to high society. Music played by a DJ in a large hall decorated with balloons and paper autumn leaves. Not for the first time that evening. I wondered what the fuck I was doing here. I wanted more peace and quiet than ever in the countryside, despite the bastard who stomped around in my attic at night. Natasha dressed in her wedding attire, shone, basking in everyone's attention. New friends appeared out of nowhere and quickly pulled her into their circles, leaving me standing on the perimeter. I expected her to keep me close to her, but except for the first few glances back, she seemed to stop paying attention to me. They don't know you, someone said behind my back. And they are nervous about what you're showing up with Natasha will mean to them. I turned around. Next to me was a young woman with a glass of champagne in her hand. Natasha has not been a member of our team for very long, but she has broken more than one man's heart. The stranger took a sip. Yes. Well done. Novikova quickly got used to it. Honestly, it was. So, Natasha was standing in the center of a small group of people and the man standing next to her put his hand on her shoulder. I walked over and stood next to Natasha. She was talking to the man whose hand was still on her shoulders. She hesitated and was silent when she sensed my presence. She turned around to see who was standing there. Her lips pressed tightly together, the smile on them beginning to fade. Then there was a bright light in her eyes again when she saw me. She shrugged, removing the hand resting on them, and took A step toward me. Natasha. Who is that? The man asked. I don't think he appreciated my intervention, at least I could tell by the look of anger that flashed across his face. He tried to hug her again, but she stopped him. This is my good friend. She said it in a tone that left no doubt that we were more than friends. The man narrowed his eyes, looked at her for a moment, and then walked away. A quiet but harsh bitch hung in the air. The rest of the group stared at me, and I smiled back at them. It was easy to see that they weren't comfortable with me, an outsider who came out of nowhere. Natasha tried to somehow introduce me to the people she worked with, but it was obvious that they belonged to a different world that I had little interest in. Talking about people I didn't know and frankly didn't want to know wasn't interesting to me, and I took the opportunity to go to the bar in search of a decent drink. I waved to the bartender and ordered a vodka and orange juice. I took the offered glass and leaned my back against the bar, watching Natasha. She was indeed the most beautiful of all the women around her. Natasha was in the middle of a small group of men, none of whom I recognized. Obviously, they were no strangers to her, as she felt very comfortable in their presence. She was laughing and even flirting with the men approaching them closely. The thought flashed through my head again. What am I doing here? A loud laugh reached me in a musical pause. Natasha lifted her cheek and the young man kissed her. Her head turned a little farther, and she noticed that I was watching her. She saw the look on my face and moved away from her companions, leaving them surprised. The stranger took a step to follow her, then stopped watching her. Her face lit up with a broad smile and she almost ran hurrying toward me. Do you miss me? Natasha asked with a smile that couldn't hide a hint of concern. I shrugged my shoulders. I just wanted to get out of here already. Her face lowered and she looked back at the group of people she had just left. A guilty expression on her face as she realized that I had been standing here for over half an hour or so. Why didn't you come over and join us? She asked. I raised my eyebrows. Natasha, since you and I are friends, let's get to you. I was there, but after the first few moments, you and your friends ignored me. So I saw no point in standing there as a spare peg. I raised my glass and took a sip, so I found myself entertained. Natasha looked embarrassed and swallowed a couple of times. The evening was winding down. I walked over to Natasha with my clothes on. She was standing with her back to me talking to the guy. Her attention shifted to me. She nodded briefly and announced that she was leaving. You're coming with me. The guy grabbed her arm. Young man. The lady said she was leaving. I tried to be as polite as possible, but somewhere deep inside me, there was a fire of rage. Frankly, my fists had been itching, and I felt the need to stretch myself. Especially since I was already sick of the glamorous faces around me. Edik, I'm sorry if you misunderstood me, but I'm going home. Natasha babbled, terrified, and snatched her hand away. The expression on the man's face became the face of a child who had lost his favorite toy. For some reason, I got the impression that he was not used to having his proposals rejected. But no sooner had we entered the parking lot when this headache and his friends caught up with us. His previously smiling face now sported a grimace of rage. He walked over to Natasha and brought his face close to hers. You won't say no when I ask you to join me and you get in my car, he said with a low hiss. You will be mine for the night because I have decided so. Honestly, I felt joyful excitement. Finally, it looked like my unrealized rage and anger would be released. The girl said no, uncle. I pushed Natasha behind my back. I was now face to face with Edik the freak. A moment later, out of the corner of my eye, I saw his fist fly right into my face. I took a step to the side when I finished landing. The cheeky Edik flew out of the parking lot and crashed into the wall of a building about 3 meters away from me, thanks to a spinning kick. But, of course, number one but me saw it coming. My opponent was lying there unconscious, but his left leg was twitching funny. A puddle was spreading under the motionless body. It looked like Edik had wet himself. Knockout. Someone said. I picked up Natasha, and in a few moments, we were already rushing along a snow-covered avenue in my car. I turned on the receiver. The horoscope for the coming week was on. The era of the fish was coming to an end. With a joyful voice the presenter ranted. Our world is entering the Aquarius era. The reign of the fish is coming to an end. What is your horoscope? I turned my head to Natasha. Pisces. Born in March. She was quiet and added on the 10th. And I'm the 7th. It's fate. I laughed. That night, of course, Natasha spent in my bed. My feet did not go unnoticed. It was clearly visible on the surveillance cameras. In the morning, a wet himself Edik filed a complaint with the police department, colorfully describing how I had made fun of his motionless body. The statement went through, and by lunchtime, the guys from the IAB had already suspended me. You should have seen their enlightened and happy faces. My criminal actions were deemed malicious hooliganism, but the case did not go to trial. I was simply offered to quietly walk away. So I did. Thank you for not demoting me. There was nothing for me to do in the city, so I went to my grandmother's house. Having bought a couple of traps for big game in a hunting store. After all, I'm supposed to find out who rattles around in the attic at night. P.S. A week later, Natasha found me. But that's another story. Dear listeners, your support is very important to us. If you like our story, please like, comment and subscribe. It's very motivating for us. We need your feedback to improve our